What's up guys, it's SuperRaeDizzle and today I'm super excited because I'm finally releasing the video on how to draw hands. I know, before you click off this video, I know that hands are like super hard to draw. They have all these weird little bones in them, they have all these weird tendons and things, but today I'm going to try to make it as simple and easy as possible. Without further ado, I don't like to ramble on, so let's just start the video.
All right, so before we can even begin to start shading the hand and adding shadows and things like that, first we need to figure out how to draw the actual shape of a hand. So I'm going to show you guys with different colors, basically how to do like a foolproof graph of how to draw a hand. Think of every single colored shape that I'm going to do as a puzzle piece. And we put all the puzzle pieces together, boom, just like that, you got a hand. So starting off, we're going to get two lines that are not parallel. They're kind of they're kind of slanted towards each other. So as they get towards the bottom, that's where the wrist is. They're kind of thin. And as it gets towards the top where the fingers are, it's going to be slightly bigger. Once you got the two lines, you're just going to connect them together. The best way for me to describe this is like a cup. Towards the bottom, it's smaller. As you get towards the top, it gets bigger. And notice that the very top line, where the top of the cup would be, I'm slightly rounding it. Because hands, you'll notice throughout this whole entire tutorial that they're not straight anywhere. So, moving on, I'm just reinforcing it so you guys can see it better. So once you got this weird little cup shape down, you have just completed the palm of your hand or the back of your hand. This works either way. So now that we have the palm ready, we're going to work on the fingers. And since I'm just showing you a basic hand shape, I'm not going to go like into joints and the shape of the fingers. I'm just going to sketch out some little twigs basically. And later we'll get more into the finger shapes. It is important to note that your fingers aren't straight right across. Like the middle finger will be bigger than the other fingers. Obviously, your pinky is going to be smaller. And that's just something to keep in mind whenever you're sketching out a hand. And if you need a reference, just look at your hand, you know? So that's the best part of drawing hands. So now that we've finished with the fingers, let's move on to my old arch nemesis, the thumb. So, starting off with the thumb, it's very different than your fingers because it's like fat and weird and slightly curved and it's not like other fingers. So, what you're going to do is basically just create a long fat finger from the very bottom of the palm. Now that you got the bone of the thumb ready, we're going to add that little web that's in between your index finger and your thumb. And that's pretty easy to add. All you have to do is just whoop, add a little swipe. So now I'm just going to reinforce everything with color. That way you guys can get a better image of it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we have the completed basic structure of a hand. Now, keep in mind, this is basic, in case you didn't hear me. Usually, if you're drawing hands, you're going to want to add the forearm/wrist. So all I'm doing is just kind of dragging two lines down. These are really easy because everybody has different size wrists, and it's just a lot easier than having to worry about the fingers and the weird thumb shape and things like that. And congratulations, we have finished the basic outline cheat sheet of a hand. And to help you guys see better, I'm going to draw on my actual hand so you guys can see the shape that we just did on an actual hand. So see, we got the thumb, we got the weird cup shape, and it is a little bit more complicated when it's on an actual hand because obviously your hand is rounded and the thing we just did is 2D. But we'll go more into joints and things like that in a second. Now that we have a very basic hand shape, we're going to start moving on to the creases, the folds, and the shadows of the hands. And why I'm talking about this is to make it look more realistic. Let me just whip up a hand real quick, and I will see you in a few seconds. Ugh, God, the thumb. I like spent so many hours drawing that stupid thing. It's like, why won't you just work? but eventually I got it. The good thing about hands is that where you'll put shadows is already indented into our hands. So every single fold that you see on my hand, that's going to be a shadow. And if it's kind of hard for you to see what I'm talking about, boom. So where'd my hand go? Okay, had to be more dramatic with that opening. But anyway, so where all those black lines are, those are all indented. So naturally, it's going to be darker in those areas. And in true opposite fashion, the highest points of your hands, so like the parts that hit the light the most, are going to be the lightest part whenever you draw your highlights. And I am pointing to them right now. And if it does seem a little confusing, I am going to talk more about it in just a second. Right now, we're focusing on the line. Now, moving on to putting on the actual lines of the hand. And I'm using my right hand as a reference, and I need my left hand to work. Where my lefty's at. But anyway, so notice I'm doing it like light strokes. I'm not putting like heavy lines. Because, like, on my hands, they're not just like one heavy line right across. They're light strokes that create those little folds. And don't worry if they're not perfect or if you are doing them too heavy, because we are going to be blending these out here in a second. And then my camera decided to stop recording. So now that we're back on track, I'm just going to be redrawing the same hand and then adding the lines again. So let's put this on hyperspeed and I will see you in a few seconds. So da-da-da-da-da, you guys have already seen all this, drawing the fingers, thumbs, all that stuff. Not missing much. So finally, on to the next step. And what I'm using is a blending tool known as a tortillon. And this is basically just a rolled piece of paper that you can get at any craft store. If you don't have one, I have a whole entire video on how to make your own. And I will link that down below. Okay, so now we're just going to blend out all the lines to make them look smooth on the hand. And you want to diffuse all these lines to create soft shadows. And basically where all the creases are, that's where all the shadows are going to be. And honestly, don't worry if you don't have a blending tool or if you might have messed up on these lines, because I am going to blend these lines into oblivion. So now that we have it blended out, we're going to add more shadows. And so starting off with the finger shadows, all I'm doing is just adding a little bit of graphite following all the joints / lines of the hand. So you'll see me going around and around that little area, and I'm just slowly building up the darkness. So while building up your shadows, you're going to want to try to avoid the very high points of the fingers. And the very high points of the fingers are the areas that catch the most light, so therefore are the most brightest areas. And the brightest areas are going to be literally the opposite placement of the shadows. So notice that little rectangle where we're putting all the shadows, what I just explained. In the very middle of that, keep that light as possible. And I'm basically just going to be doing this over and over again until I get like nice, deep, dark shadows. And I don't want to start off with just like a straight up black charcoal pencil, because I want to build up my shadows and make them like really soft and get that nice gradient. So it does take a little bit to build up the shadows because we're doing this literally like over and over again. But the results are really nice whenever you finally get that finished piece and all the shadows are like in a nice gradient instead of like white and then like white paper and then just like a harsh black line, you know? If you're still confused as to where to put the shadows at, I'm just going to draw with a red colored pencil all the low points on a hand. So pretty much where there's red, that's where you're going to add the shadows. Okay, so got it? Screenshot it if not, because we are moving on. All right, moving on to reinforcing the lines. I am using a mechanical pencil, and the reason I'm using a mechanical pencil is basically because it's a lot harder and sharper, a lot more precise, and also a lot harder to blend in comparison to a regular number 2 pencil. And I don't want any of these lines that I'm currently working on to be blended out super hard to the point where you can't see them again, because these are going to be in the final piece of our hand. And I'm also using an eraser pencil. Yes, you heard that right. A literal pencil that erases just to clean up the lines. And if they are too harsh, which some of mine were, just go ahead and start blending those out. Now, moving on to the dark areas of the hand, I'm just going to be using this sad little ebony pencil. I don't know where my big one is, so I'm just going to be ratchet and use this one. And what I'm going to do with this, first let me explain what an ebony pencil is. It's a very, very dark, soft graphite. And it's really, really nice if you're a beginner and you don't know how to use charcoal yet, because this stuff just blends like nobody's business. Ugh, I love it so much. Anyway, and I'm just going to again reinforce all those lines. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the magic happens. So now, adding that ebony pencil, I'm just going to go over pretty much every area that has shadows, and it's just going to start giving it that realistic 3D look, because now you're adding not only the white from the paper, but now you have almost that pure black from the ebony pencil. And yes, I'm using my finger because I'm a barbarian. And finally, the second to the last step will be to add the shadow casted by the hand. And if you watch my other videos, for example, my candy cane one, a hint, then you'll know that adding a casted shadow will give it a 3D realistic element, kind of like it's almost there. And it's pretty simple. You don't have to copy my exact one because you could just use your own hand as a reference. But all I'm doing is just on the left side of every single finger and palm and everything, all I'm doing is just adding pure black lines and diffusing them. And that's just going to give it the illusion that light is hitting on the right side and a shadow is casted on the left. So bada bing, bada boom. Just like that, you got yourself a nice little hand. And I'm sorry this video was kind of long and complicated. It's just that hands themselves are complicated. Alright guys, I didn't realize how much time we have already spent on this, so let's just get the joints and let's just bust it out. Alright, so starting off with the joints, you're going to want to treat them like they are circles. So now we're going to talk about fingers. And fingers are like parallel lines, except the top will be completely straight and the bottom will be slightly rounded. As for fingertips, they are just slightly pointed, but you don't want them to look like witch fingers. And I realize that this video is pretty long right now, so I'm not going to go into deep detail of joints as I had originally planned. But next week, or whenever, if you guys want to see that, maybe next week or sometime down later in the year, let me know if you guys want to see a video on strictly finger movements. So I'm just going to fast forward it and show you guys a really quick clip of do's and don'ts of joints. And the do's for joints and finger movements is to make it look all fluid and try not to make it look so hard and just like straight lines. Like fingers are curved and they do have like some organic movement to them. So whenever you do try to draw the fingers, just pay extra attention to them and how they look. You don't want them to look too robotic. So that would be my do's. For my don'ts, I'll be displaying really harsh lines that don't look human, almost like a monster claw, so that's something you want to think about.
Alright guys, that's all the tips and tricks I have for you today. If you have any questions, y'all know the drill, leave them down below. And if you guys want to be more involved in my video process, my Instagram is where you guys can do that at. I do live streams once a week for at least an hour. I think that's the maximum that you're allowed to live stream is an hour. and I ask you guys questions, I show like upcoming video ideas, and it's a way for me and you to like communicate like one-on-one. And people tag me all the time in their drawings so I can like critique them or just look at them, and it's a lot of fun. Other than that, thank you guys again for watching. I love you guys so much. Let's not make 2017 suck. Let's have a good one. Okay. Alright guys, so I'll see you next time. Bye.